thank you for joining us on our brand new podcast where two best friends talk about movies all the time. I guess before we jump into our first week, we should really introduce ourselves. Nick, why don't you go first?
Hi, I'm Nick. Curtis and I have known each other for a very long time. We used to work in a movie theater together, and that's kind of where our friendship blossomed from. And then we went to college and sat next to each other in graduation. It was awesome.
It's the best of times. So, I guess we're getting this podcast together to talk about movies. So, what are some of your favorite movies?
Some of my favorite movies. I love the first Jurassic Park is probably one of my favorites.
Classic.
And yeah, Little Miss Sunshine, obviously. Spring Breakers, which we will probably make a show about coming up here soon.
We can't do a podcast without talking about that movie.
No, it's just art. What about you, Curtis?
So obviously the episode that we're doing today is my number one. It's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And then Moonlight, Black Swan, Singing in the Rain. I could go on, and it changes from day to day, but I just love any kind of movie.
And I still have your copy of Singing in the Rain, too.
That you do. That's probably been like 2 years in the making now.
Yeah.
It's all good, man. I can get a new copy. So, yeah. Anyways, you want to jump into this week's episode?
So this week's episode, as Curtis has already mentioned, is about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. It's just a fun movie to watch, just all around. This is Curtis's favorite movie, so I'm going to let him take over because he definitely knows a lot about this movie.
So yeah, this is Edgar Wright directed this movie. He's my favorite director working right now, possibly ever. And this is my favorite movie of his. The style is so spot on, and we'll talk about that later. A little about the movie. It was a really big box office failure. The budget was $60 million, and it only made almost $48 million worldwide. So it really didn't make a lot of money, but there's a huge cult following for this movie, and I'm sure they've probably made a lot of that money back through DVD sales and merch sales, because there's a lot of Scott Pilgrim merch out there. So yeah, as we'll talk about, this is just one of the most stylistically perfect movies, and the cast. Can we talk about how great this cast is for a minute?
Yeah. You have Anna Kendrick, you have
Yes.
Chris Evans, obviously Michael Cera,
Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Mae Whitman. Oh, it goes on and on. For the next part, we want to give just a little synopsis, and this is going to go into spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen the movie in the 10 years it's been out yet. But we wanted to do something kind of fun. So I'm going to try to give the synopsis of this movie in a minute or less. This will be interesting. Alright, so we meet Scott Pilgrim. He's with his bandmates. He's talking about this new girl that he's dating. He's 22 years old, and he's dating a high schooler. So obviously they're giving him some crap, and she comes and... Oh, crap. He doesn't see any flaws, and everybody's giving him flaws, and then he sees this dream. He has a dream, and he sees this girl, and the girl is like his dream girl. So he runs into this girl in real life while he's dating this high schooler, and he decides that he really needs to get close to this girl and know who she is. He's just so enamored with her. Turns out she just moved to town, and they have some awkward interactions. Knives is his high school girlfriend, and she is totally obsessed with Scott, and Ramona, this new girl, is not as easy to impress, and that really challenges Scott, so he goes after that. He ends up dating both at the same time, and then he has to fight Ramona's 7 evil exes, and stuff goes down, and I'm running out of time. Damn it, I failed at that shit.
You had 3 seconds. You had 3 seconds left. You were going to make it.
Oh, God, I knew it was not going to make it.
And then he ends up finding himself in the end.
It's truly a coming-of-age story. I was not prepared for that at all. But
you did really
good.
It's
a coming-of-age story about finding himself and self-respect. It's a really touching story.
Not to mention all the aspects of just like witty comedy and nostalgia for just like nerds and gamers in general.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie geared towards a very specific audience, people about our age who are into video games, and Edgar Wright's style really blends into that. He mixes in so many sound effects from old video games like Zelda and Final Fantasy, Mario, and he fully immerses the audience in this world that he's created, this like almost dreamlike fantasy world of what we would create if we could make a world like that.
The sound design really just takes on its own character,
Oh, for sure.
um, which is much like most of his movies in general. I mean, you look at Baby Driver as well, where the sound design is so well mixed that it just becomes its own entity, which is very much so the case in Scott Pilgrim as well, because we actually feel like we're in a video game, or like Scott, our main character, is viewing the world in a video game.
Yeah. One sound effect that I noted was when they were all in Scott's room talking about knives. Kim says something pretty negative about the fact that he's dating a high schooler, and you hear like a computer error sound, and then she repeats it, and you hear like the eject sound, like if you eject something from a computer, and that was Scott ejecting from that side of the conversation and going somewhere else.
I think my favorite portion with sound design that they use is the scene in the coffee shop when Allison, or Aubrey Plaza's character, it has that little like bleep bar over her mouth, and it is just so well done.
Yes, they do that. They do that a few times throughout the movie, and apparently there was one time Edgar Wright was going to let her say the F word, but because Michael Cera calls Todd a cocky cock, using the F word on top of that would have been a rated R movie, so they had to cut it back.
That is unfortunate.
So, do you want to talk about some stuff with the story?
Oh yeah. I think you pretty much nailed most of it. I think for me, like what I really like about this movie, is, and like it's really interesting watching it over the 10 years, because I remember watching it when it first came out, and I had a totally different perspective on everything than I do now. And it definitely holds up over time, but you start seeing like different perspectives that you wouldn't normally have. Like, I don't know if this is the same for you, Curtis, but my perspective, like, especially with the whole Knives and Ramona situation, I was also, like, much like Scott Pilgrim, I was very, enamored with Ramona's character as well, and the mystery behind her. And I was like, I thought Knives was super annoying whenever I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I got older, I started to realize, like, wow, even after he dumps her, she, like, Knives still is ready to fight for Scott, and I think the loyalty in that is very interesting. And even though he hurt her, she's still ready for.
Oh, for sure. She's ride or die, and that's great.
Yeah.
I think the one thing interesting about this movie is how, as I get older, I realize how shitty every character is, except for like maybe a couple. Like everybody has major moral issues, and really the only two characters that are more mature are his sister, played by Anna Kendrick, and Wallace, his roommate, and they're kind of like Wallace, the moral guardians trying to push everybody in the right direction.
I love Wallace's character so much.
So good.
He very much so reminds me of my roommate too, and like and he's very witty, and like over the years, like Wallace is one of my favorite characters, honestly, in the movie.
I would actually agree. He just brings such a great energy on top of everybody else in this movie. It's a pleasure to watch him.
Oh, and the deadpan humor too on top of it. It's great.
Oh yeah, I just love the dynamic between his sister and Wallace, where Scott will tell something to Wallace, and he'll be like, "Don't tell my sister, you know me." And then his sister calls immediately, "Wallace!" So on top of the story, there's also a lot of technical stuff to really enjoy here. For one, the opening credits, it really expands the room that they're in. It shows them practicing with their band, but the camera pans out and just keeps going backwards. And that was actually a room that they built so that they could dolly the camera back and make that room look really big. That was something impressive to me.
We probably used an incredibly wide-angle lens on top of that as well.
Yeah. And then all the actors have credit cards, like with their names on it, and each card has something specific to that character on it. Like Lucas Lee, played by Chris Evans, has skateboards on his, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead has all the different colors because Ramona changes her hair a lot. There were a lot of different things like that in there.
I love how they just immediately started the movie. Like, as soon as the screen fades in from black, the Universal logo is pixelated.
Just thrust you right into that world.
I feel like you would be kind of hesitant at first because you're like, all right, how much of this element is going to be in this movie?
Right.
And it is completely immersed. Every single little thing has, like, even when he goes to the bathroom, he's a pee bar.
That's a scene I want to talk about in a minute if you don't know about that one. But first is something I learned in the commentary listening to Edgar Wright. I've seen this movie probably 50 times. I watch it once every few months, and there are still little details I don't notice. So when Scott and Ramona are riding home after the first fight and they're talking about their relationship, if you look out the window on the bus, all the streetlights have been edited to be hearts. And that's just like something in the background nobody really pays attention to, but they took care to actually do that for all the streetlights.
What?
Yeah, you have to go back and watch that scene. All the streetlights are like illuminated hearts. It's really cool.
I literally just had, like, I've had the movie on while we are talking about this, just muted in the background. So now I'm like, wait, what? This is Curtis's episode, by the way.
I've seen this a few times. So the P-bar thing. That whole scene, it starts in the band's house, and he goes to the bathroom, and he comes out, and he's in this weird dream state, like, in this school, right? And he sees Ramona. Do you know this story?
No.
So that was actually a practical change they did. They built the set to be two-sided, and one side was the house, the other side was the lockers for the school. So when Michael Cera goes into the bathroom and closes the door, the crew flips the entire set around to become the school, and he comes out and the scene continues.
Holy shit.
That is something that I always love telling people. It's so much fun.
Oh, that's... you can definitely tell Edgar Wright put a lot of love into this movie, for sure.
Oh, yeah. He pours everything into it. It's so great.
So here's my question for you, Curtis.
What's up?
You got kind of my, over the years, view of the movie. What's yours, like?
So yeah, when I first saw it, it was in theaters, and I was like, yeah, that was a really good, fun movie. I didn't think much of it. I saw it twice in theaters, I think, and I was like, yeah, that was fine. And then it came out on DVD, and I watched it again, and I just kept watching it, and it never got old. And then I started noticing more details, and the layers started to add up, and it quickly just became my favorite movie of all time. It's not the best movie ever by any means, but it's definitely my favorite, in that the style is so my style and, like, aimed towards me. Like, I relate to this movie so much.
So, what character do you identify with the most?
When I was younger, I definitely identified with Scott, and now I'm definitely more of a Wallace.
The evolution of man.
Yes. See, I grew up and got married, and now, totally different game.
So, here's an interesting... I was reading some articles beforehand. I haven't seen this movie as much as Curtis, but I do absolutely love this movie a lot. One thing that one article I read on Rotten Tomatoes was talking about was a lot of the cult following behind Scott Pilgrim. A lot of them compare Ramona to Kate Winslet's character in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Which I found super interesting because they're both very reminiscent of one another, including the hair color as well, but just their personalities. They're very kind of mysterious, and you never really get to know their character fully. They're very much so, what is the word I'm looking for here? Over glorified by their specters, which is so Scott and Jim Carrey's character in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I found incredibly interesting.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and say that both movies are actually pretty similar too, if you think about the fact that they're both love stories based in this weird, realistic but also fantasy world where things seem normal, but there's little aspects that are fantastical.
Oh, absolutely. I guess the nice thing about Scott Pilgrim though is like you're not gonna cry during it.
No, yeah, they definitely have different styles for sure. Scott Pilgrim is a much easier movie to get into and much more fun.
Like you can completely take out the love aspect out of it. Well, I guess you can't, otherwise you wouldn't have a movie. But you can watch it for other purposes.
Right, there's so much going on.
All the fight scenes. Oh my god.
Yeah, I saw that in the notes. You wanted to talk about the different styles.
Oh my god. Like every single fight scene is just incredible in and of itself. Like the first one where he gets the email and just completely disregards it, and then all of a sudden this dude shows up trying to fight him, and he's like, what
And it breaks out into a Bollywood style dance video where he's throwing fireballs.
Yes.
And yeah, that's the really interesting part about this movie is it treats it like a video game. Each X is a different boss with their own style that Scott has to overcome and learn a lesson and grow as a person to defeat. So in each one offers something new, so you're not like, oh, it's another fight scene, we're gonna see how this one goes. It's something new and exciting every time.
Funny story actually. The first time I watched this movie, the fight scene with the vegan, I had literally in 2010 when this movie came out, I had never heard what a vegan was before.
Oh no.
So I actually learned what veganism is from this movie.
That's incredible. Edgar Wright teaching life lessons since 2010.
Yes, thank you, Edgar Wright, for teaching me what a vegan was. I was uninformed before.
And also probably pretty upset when you actually tried to go vegan and didn't get powers.
I did try to go vegetarian and I was just hungry.
I feel that for sure. So, yeah, one more thing about the cast. Like, if they ever wanted to make a sequel of this movie, the budget would be astronomical. Like, there's no way they could afford this. Brie Larson's in this movie. We haven't even mentioned that yet.
And do you know what her dollar worth is now?
Nowhere near what she got paid for Scott Pilgrim. She's a Marvel... We got 2 Marvel superheroes in this movie. And Superman.
Right. Like, and Michael Cera's, like, probably definitely gone up in value since then.
Oh, yeah. He's big on Broadway now.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, he's
Michael
doing a lot
Cera?
of theater stuff. Yeah.
Michael Cera is big on Broadway.
Yeah, I don't think he does musicals. I think it's more theater stuff, but yeah, okay. He's big into theater.
Okay, Curtis, so here's my question.
What's up?
Do you think it is ever possible to have a Scott Pilgrim versus the World musical?
I hadn't until you said that, and now I'm going to go to the writer's room right away and make this happen. I was born to do this. There is your life goal there, your purpose in life. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, my entire life discovered right here on this podcast.
And you've been a witness to this too. Curtis has just discovered his life purpose.
I have to find a way to recreate the Clash of Demon Head scene though when that band comes on, because I still get chills every time I see that scene.
My God, that's probably one of the best and probably the most noted scene in the entire movie, arguably.
Yeah. And it's a crime that the Brie Larson version of that song hasn't been released. There's nowhere where you can listen to it unless you watch that scene.
So she actually sung that, didn't she?
Yeah, that was her, yeah. She was big into like being a pop star for a while there.
I absolutely believe it. Everything about that scene, though, down to like the editing, where we're like flashing back and forth between Scott and
Todd.
Well, every single one of them is like flashing back and forth, and that's gives you kind of this like nice foreshadowing effect about like the next fight that's about to happen too.
Yeah, I love the stakes in that scene because you just start to find out what's going on, and Ramona's starting to realize that Todd is her ex, and then the band comes on, and it's high stakes. Tight cuts, everybody's making eye contact, and you know it's about to go down, and then this banger of a song comes in.
And then afterwards, the scene backstage, which is like super dimly lit, and just the camera angles that like create this like weird tension between them.
That conversation is so awkward.
Oh my god.
My favorite part is Knives, who's oblivious to all of the awkward tension that's going on and just trying to like talk to Brie Larson's Envy. She's trying to talk to Envy because she has like a huge fan, and everybody else is in this awkward tension fighting like scene. It's so good.
He punched the highlights out of her hair.
I love the blue stains on the wall behind her too. That is such a good touch.
He punched the highlights out of her hair.
That whole scene just needs to go in a museum.
It's
like 20 minutes of that movie right there. Museum right there.
Oh, absolutely. Everything from like the start of the Clash of Demon Heads concert to the end of the vegan fight.
The vegan police.
The vegan police.
Chicken isn't vegan?
Gelato isn't vegan?
Milk and eggs, bitch. Oh, man. Is there anything else you wanted to hit before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I don't think these people want to hear us ramble anymore.
No, I think we've bothered them enough, the ones that are still here, so I think this is going to be a normal thing, right? We're going to do this on a hopefully weekly basis?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So, rumor has it, next week's episode is probably going to be a heavy Nick episode.
Yes!
Looks like rumor has it, we may or may not be looking into Spring Breakers next week, so that's what everybody has to look forward to next week.
This is breaking news right here. That is amazing. I'll spoil it now. We saw this movie together, and it was quite the experience.
we will give our whole experience about this movie on next week's episode, friends.
It's kind of an iconic moment in our friendship is going to see Spring Breakers.
Tune in next week.
We will see you next week. Thanks for joining us.